Hello and welcome to this video series to hopefully help you learn how to write DAX expressions faster. My name is Pat Mahoney. I'm not a BI professional. I do data as a hobby, and I also provide free Power Platform training to Indianapolis nonprofits. And you can see my contact information there, including the blog. And please also subscribe to this YouTube video channel. Hopefully I have good plans to make a bunch more content. For years I've been writing DAX, even before Power BI came out, was doing it in Power Pivot, and it's taken me years to get proficient at it. And it's always bothered me that it takes, DAX is tricky, and it takes people a long time to come up that curve, and I wish I had come up it faster. I recently saw Marco Russo give a talk, and he listed the four key concepts that one has to understand to master DAX listed here. And so it gave me an idea to come up with this video series to hopefully bring others up the curve faster. For years I've read just about every blog out there, it seemed like, or watched every video. A ton of stuff from SQL BI, Power Pivot Pro. I was proud to eventually write a bunch of posts on that site. Matt Allington, Phil Seamark, guys in a cube. I mean, just consumed as much content as I could, and so I'm trying to distill down the things I've taken away or how I approach it, and hopefully bring you up the curve faster. So these are the four key concepts that I intend to demonstrate through this. I think it will be a 5-part video series. And again, there's no substitute for lots of practice, and I think I've made all the mistakes. There's no substitute for that, and I still do, and you will too. But the sooner you can understand these concepts, the better off you're going to be, and the fewer mistakes you'll make. I'll say up front that this class is really focused on learning DAX. I may do other topics later. So this is not a course about report design, so this will not be pretty. M is awesome, and what you can do in the query editor, and I'm sure I'll do videos on that in the future, but that's not the focus of this. We're actually starting with a already done model. And why is DAX so important? I like to say that visualization is for show and analysis is for dough. With Power BI, you can quickly make visuals and do sort of first level analyses. But it's really with advanced DAX expressions that you can really surface new insights to hopefully help you make better decisions. All right, so let's get started. The framework for this class, this series, is shown here, and basically it's going to be starting with a data model. So let's pretend you have a coworker. They've already built a data model for sales in your company. But they're going on vacation, and on their way out the door, they say, hey, here's the PBIX file, and you need to finish the report. This PBIX file, I'll put a link to it down below the video, both the starting version in case you want to follow along, as well as the finished version with all the measures that we'll write in the series. The nice thing about this one is that this is a totally self-contained file, so it doesn't connect to anything outside. All of the data is generated with random numbers, etc., inside the query editor, so you can certainly take a look at that and see how that's done. And this is a file I also like to use, like when I'm answering questions on the community, to try out things that maybe I hadn't tried before to see if it'll work before I suggest it to somebody. And the nice thing is, while this uses random numbers, it actually uses the seed parameter in the list.random function to generate the same random number every time. So even if you end up hitting refresh on this model, you'll get the same numbers, and so the numbers you see should match with the numbers that you'll see as we go along. All right, so we've been given this PBIX file along with a list of requests that the report consumers are looking for, the data they want to see for the report. And I've selected these to sort of highlight those four concepts, and we're going to just build, and each video will be one of these tabs where we'll talk about that topic. All of these things are going on at the same time, so whether you understand them or not, they're happening, so it just builds on it, and so some of these will build on the ones before, but many measures use all four of these. They're always happening. All right, so let's get started. The first thing we want to do is we've been given a new PBIX file, and we want to understand the model, right? So we can go through this and just sort of see what we're starting with here. And so the first thing I typically do if someone asks me to help with their PBIX file is to look at the diagram view, which is this one over here, and I'll say, okay, this looks fairly simple. We have a sales table, and we'll look at the contents of that in a minute. We've got a product table without remaining columns, and a date table. So that's great. One of the key things I encourage people to do when they first start is to make sure we turn off the auto date time setting, and you'll see that as a popular suggestion out there. And it looks like this person that gave us the report has already done that. But you want to make sure that is unchecked. That's at the global setting, which I encourage you to do that, so all your future models will have that turned off. But if you find someone gives you an older file, or they have it turned on, you can turn it on the current file under here on data load. You can uncheck that box. So that's great. All right, so a simple model. All the relationships, we can see which fields have the relationship. There's one between product ID here, that's good. And then between date and sale date. Great. The other great thing to see here is that we have one-to-many relationships, which is what you want to see. You certainly can have other types of relationships, but this is definitely the preferred way. One thing I always say is simple model, simple DAX. And certainly having one-to-many relationships is a key element of having a simple model. The other thing is to have direction filters that only go one direction. So it is possible to double click on this and to change the thing so that cross filters in both directions. Again, that's something you do not want to do. You want to avoid it if you can. So this is a nice looking model, real simple. Again, I designed this to just be real simple, just to be able to highlight these key concepts. The other thing is this is consistent with what they call a star schema, in that each table is sort of one relationship away from the table we're doing analysis on. You certainly can daisy chain tables and have relationships. Sometimes that's needed and it works. But the more you can have just one relationship between tables, the easier your life is going to be. All right. Okay, so the other thing we can do is start to look at the data itself. So if we go to the data view, we can start to look at this. And I'll click on the sales table. And the first thing I usually do is say, okay, there's 5,400 rows in the sales table. Not too bad. You can, do sorting and say, okay, this goes from the 1st of 2018, to September 14th. And we've got quantity values. We've got sale IDs. Another useful thing is to look at this number for distinct values. So we have 5,400 rows, and then we have 5,400 distinct values. That's good to know. So the granularity of this table is one sale for every row. So that's important, and that'll come into play as we write some of the measures. For product ID, looks like there's 9 different products that are sold here, and that's probably all we need to see on that table. If we look at the product table, nice and small table here, we see we've got 3 different categories, 3 distinct values there for those 9 products. So it looks like all of the products have sales, because we have 9 values here and 9 values there. So that's likely the case. We've got the price in this table as well. I put them in both places so that we can talk about the related function and how you would pull things from one table to another. And then we've got the product ID, and then this is the field that has the relationship to the sales table. Okay, and then if we click on the date table, it turns out this date table is dynamically generated to go over the date range of our sales. And so if we click here, we can see there's 1,095 rows, also that many distinct values. So every row here is one day, right? So that's the granularity. Also, I didn't say it, but the product table, there was one product per row. So the granularity of that was one product per row. And then, we can sort descending here. In this case, the date table goes to the end of the year of the last sale. So since we had, I think it was September 14th sales, we went to the end of that year. And then there are these other columns, which are the things we're going to want to make our visuals around. So if we want to show things by month, or I often use year, month, number together, so you get the year and month in one column, but you can have it separate as well, or create a hierarchy that maybe will show year and month, quarter, how we're doing by day of the week, that kind of thing. While we're on this date table, and again, a date table is something you should have in any model that has dates, and you're going to do any kind of date time analysis, is to mark that date table. Mark the table as the date table. And so if you come here and click this, you'll get this pop-up. You choose the column that is the date column in the date table. It will say validated successfully, which just means that they're chronological and their every date value from start to finish is there. And hit OK. And so now we've marked that as a date table. The other thing you want to make sure you do in your date table is, one thing you'll quickly see is, say you make a visual with month name and some measure, you'll see that the months are sorted alphabetically. So you'll see April, then August, etc. So it's very common to make these sort by columns where you have the numeric version of whatever it is you're doing. So you'll see I created that in this table. So there's the month name, the month number. There's this year month column, as well as a year month sort, I called it. So it has the numeric version of that. And so what you can do is pick these, click on column tools here, and then choose sort by column. And in this case, we're going to sort it by the month column, which is numeric. This year month column, do the same, and do that with the year month sort. These were already set. I'm just demonstrating. And then I don't have the day of the week number, but you would add that too, and then you could sort the day of the week by that as well. Okay. All right, so let's go back. So we got a sense of how many rows are in each table now. We know what our granularity is, so every row there's one X on there. And then, you can also, if needed, you look on the report view as well. So, excuse me, so I can make like a card visual, and I could, drag the sale ID into that field well, and see what the default aggregation is. In this case, it was account. So I could also have done this and say, okay, that's the number of rows in the sales column, right? I like to do it in the data view. It's a little easier. But you could also, make a table visual and say, okay, I want to see, what the values are, right? So, okay, those are the categories. Those are the products. Real original product naming there. So it's not as efficient, but you can also understand your data model by doing making basic visuals as well. Okay, so before we start getting into actually writing DAX, I wanted to cover a little bit about all the stuff you can do with no DAX at all, right? And so let's talk about that. So in each of these tabs, I've picked out some of the measures that were listed in that initial request list from the report consumers. And so I showed one just a second ago, but Again, you can do real simple aggregations with these things called implicit measures. These are things you probably want to get past using these very quickly and write proper DAX expressions, but they are good in a pinch, and they certainly are a powerful way for people to get started. So in this case, if we want the total quantity by month and year and by product and category, we could just start dragging stuff into a visual. So in this case, I'll make a matrix visual. So we want rows and columns, and I'll put the year on rows, and let's just do the category for now on columns. We'll just do one way each, and then we want to have the total quantity. And so if a quantity is a numeric column, it's got this sigma symbol here in our thing. We can just drag it into the table, make sure that it's the aggregation is on sum, and then boom, we've got our first visual here that sums the quantity. So we know the quantity of products sold during each year. And of course, we can add other things here. So we can do that so that we can then expand and look at that by month. And the great thing about doing these analyses in Power BI is the filtering occurs in the visual itself. So you have these measures. In this case, this is an implicit measure because all I did was drag it in there and chose an aggregation. But the filtering occurs in the visual. And so measures are these global formula that calculate locally, right? So it basically, says, okay, filter the data down to category 1 and to month January and year 2019, and give me the total, the sum of the quantity column. So again, this is one formula that just works in each of these cells here. So very different than how we did it in Excel. Okay, so I said that we want to quickly get past writing using implicit measures. So let's write our first explicit measure. And so you can do that here and just click on New Measure. And we'll just call it total quantity. And then we'll just do the sum. And then you see the little pop-up there. I'll hit Tab to accept that top one there. And then we want to go to the sales table. So I'll start typing sales. And then I can click on quantity. I could double click, or I can click and tab and then hit that. And then this is called an explicit measure because I've explicitly written the calculation and table and column that I want to use. So here's the table, here's the column. You'll be writing that a lot with all your DAX expressions to do your calculations. All right, so now if we add that to our matrix instead and get rid of the implicit measure, we get the same results as we had before. Okay. Okay, so that's just a real simple sum measure, and you'll notice it created this entity over here with a little calculator by it, which tells us that it's a measure. One good practice is to actually have a table to store your measures in, and so we actually have one, and I had hidden it before, but I created this measures table with this simple expression here, and I just put an underscore measures such that the underscore makes it float to the top so that my measures table is always at the top, and use this simple expression here and just created basically a blank table. Measures sit on tables, and it's a good practice to put them all into one table. And so basically use this approach where you just put it inside of curly brackets and just put a blank expression there, and the curly bracket says this is a table, and so it generates your blank table. I could have created that from scratch just by hitting New Table and then typing that expression, giving it a name, and it would create a blank table there. So it'll happen to you that you'll create some measure and it'll create on a table below, and you'll say, oh, that's not the table I wanted it to go to. So what you can do is click on that measure and then click on Measure Tools, and if it's not already highlighted, and then you can say what's my home table for that, and you can say I want that to be in the Measures table, and so that will move the measure up to there and be there with the rest of your tables, with the rest of your measures. Okay, so all right, we made the sum measure, we put it in a measures table. The other thing that's really handy, and again, this is the no DAX, and we've already written a little here just to do an example, but with implicit measures you don't. But I wanted to show you the sum quantity measure just to, again, you should quickly get past that, and we did. So the other one is quick measures. So these actually generate DAX expressions, but you don't have to know how to write them. It's done for you. So in this case, we're going to use a quick measure to come up with the quantity of category 1. So in this case, yes, we already have a measure that tells us the total quantity, but category 1 is a real important category for our company, and so we want a measure that just directly gives us that value. So I'll delete this visual here and create a new table. And so what we can do is just click on Quick Measure, and this gives you this list of potential calculations that you want to do, and I encourage you to take a look at the ones that are available here. And we said, hey, we want to filter down to just category 1. So I'm going to choose this one called filtered value, and this is all just wizard driven, and so we want to do total quantity. So again, I'm going to go take that quantity column, drag it there. I want it to be sum, but I could have selected other aggregations as well. And then I said we want to just worry about category 1. So let's go grab the category column, and then the values that are in that column will come up, and I'll choose category 1. I could have multi-selected values here as well. And then I hit OK, and we'll see that it will create a quick measure for us. And so if we click on that, you can see that it created this DAX expression for us. And we're going to learn how to write these kind of expressions. And it did this one called calculate, which we'll learn all about. And it's that same expression we wrote before, the sum of the sales table. And then it's saying, hey, I want to put a filter on the category column in the product table, and I'm going to limit it to the value of category 1. And it wrote it like this, where it does in, and then remember the curly brackets are a table. So if we had selected multiple, then it would have done this, right, to say, hey, we want it to be category 1 or category 2. Typically how you'll write this, if you're filtering down to a single category, if there's a single value there, you can just write equals and then get rid of the curly brackets and just say I want to do, again, filter where the product category is category 1, and this is an equivalent expression. And so again, we could put that into our visual. And then we see the total quantity. Again, we could add the year to that, move that to the top, and again, we've got that same value for total quantity, and then the value for each year. And again, the calculation is the same. This calculation is occurring for each of these values, including the total, which totals really aren't totals, and let's talk about that. But then it applies this formula, and the visual provides additional filtering. So it says do this calculation, but before you do it, filter the year down to 2018, 19, and 20, and then calculate those values. So that's how DAX expressions work. It's filter, then math, right? It does all the filtering, then it does the calculation. And so in this case, the visual is providing filtering on the year, and then the measure is providing an additional filter to the category of 1. Okay. All right. So there's another trick you can do, or trick, it's another feature where you could, again, even one more thing you can do without writing any DAX, and this is this top N here. So if I change this visual, so I'll get rid of that, and I'll put in product, since we want to get the top 3 products. So I'll put in the product column. We've got our 9 values there, and I'll put in the total quantity, which remember is just the sum of the quantity column. We see those values here, but our request is we want to see the top 3. And later we'll learn how to write that as a DAX expression, but you can also do that within the visual. So if you look over here in the field pane, let me click on a column here so that goes away, so you can see this in the filters panel, which you can hide or collapse. If we look on the product column and pull that down, you could see I could do some filtering here. So we could have gotten to, say, category 1. If we could have brought the category column over to here and filtered it to category 1. That would have been another no DAX way to get to what we're looking for. But this one has the 9 product values. We could select or multi-select those. But there's also this feature here called top N. And so in top N, we could say, hey, I want the top 3. And, basically it's saying, how do you want to sort those? I could say, well, I want them to be sorted by total quantity. And then when I click on apply filter, you'll see that it filters this down to just the top 3 products and shows the values for those. So again, there's quite a bit you can do in Power BI. So between what you can do in the query editor, where you can simply through a ribbon interface, take on big data sets and aggregate and bring in a bunch of data and transform it to what you need. You can also do quite a bit of basic analyses by using implicit measures, by just dragging columns into field wells and choosing the right aggregation, by using quick measures, and by using these filter options inside the visual. Okay, so that's finishing the no DAX tab here, and so we'll stop this video and move on to row context in the next one.